Hello, we're going to learn to make music for the Game Boy using an emulator and a ROM image called Little Sound DJ that's been homebrewed. We'll need three things: a Windows computer. There are other options such as Linux or Mac or even mobile, whatever emulator you want to use. And if you're not going to do Windows, then we'll go ahead and I'll put a timestamp in the description and you can go ahead and skip past all this part here in the beginning. The second thing we'll need is an emulator, and that's going to be BGB. That's at bgb.birc.org. And this is the most accurate emulation of the Game Boy as far as sound is concerned. Couldn't tell you about what it does for games. Probably fine. But I've been doing this for over 10 years, and I don't think I could really tell you. If you put up a hardware Game Boy track versus something done on an emulator, I probably couldn't tell the difference. We're going to hit download, and we're going to choose this top one here. I've already downloaded it, but go ahead and download it. And then the other thing we're going to need is Little Sound DJ. I'm going to back on up here. Too far. Little Sound DJ, that's at littlesounddj.com. That's simple. We're going to scroll down a little bit. There's a lot of information here about how it works and what it is. We want to grab the manual and the ROM image. We're going to go to the download area. We're going to hit documentation. We're going to grab 926, version 926. Most current at the time of recording. Go ahead and download that. Your computer. I already have, but there I've got two of them. We're going to go back again to ROM images and stable, because that's where the most stable are. It's still under development. At the time of recording, it looks like the most recent update was back in August, so Johan is still putting work in. That's 940. We're going to download that as well. And we're going to make sure we're going to pull those files, which I've got here. We're going to drop those, open them up, drop their contents into our tutorial folder that we've created. And not too much in either one of them. They're pretty straightforward. Then we're going to go and we're going to open it up, and bgb.exe is the program itself. And it's going to probably give you a Windows protected your PC thing. Skip it, run anyway. And the first thing you'll see is the window is very small, depending on your monitor size resolution. So go ahead and right click and choose window size. For me, at my resolution, 4:4 works pretty good, but whatever you want to use, it doesn't matter to me. Whatever is comfortable for you to look at. And then the other things we're going to want to do is we're going to go into options. I'm going to pull that up here. And we want to go to joypad, and we want to configure your either a game controller or a keyboard. I prefer game controller. It's very much like the hardware, so if you ever do need to play it on hardware, or if you're going to play a live show, or you just want to hear your music played on legitimate hardware, that way the controls are going to be familiar to you, and it just kind of adds to it a little bit, in my opinion. So you hit that, and you can see it tells you which button to press and hold on your controller, and it's going to turn green once you've held it for a moment. And I like to try to match the inputs here, like so. And the other thing we want to go is into sound, and we're going to drag latency all the way to the left. That is going to create a visual delay between what we hear and what we see. It's not that critical. It's not a big deal. We're not trying to play a game or something where a couple of milliseconds of latency is going to make a big difference to us. Our concern is entirely in sound. Higher latency is going to create some artifacting and stuff, and we just don't want that. And then we'll hit OK. And the last thing we want to do is right click again, and we're going to hit load ROM. And right there in our folder should be LSDJ940. I've got a different file in here. Ignore that one. And it's going to run a couple of tests here to make sure that the image is correct. I'm going to go ahead and switch over to here. Taking a moment. Taking there. And there we are. We can see our cursor brings us around here. Pressing buttons seems to do stuff. We're going to have to learn the controls here in just a moment. Alright, let's hurry up and make some sounds. The Game Boy has 4 channels, and each of these columns is representative of those. This first one, PU1, is a pulse wave. It is a square wave with varying duty cycles. And this one has a sweep function, which we'll get into. Pulse 2, PU2, is the same thing, but without that sweep function. So those are quite similar. The third one here is a soft synthesizer, a sort of granular synthesizer at a very low resolution, as well as sample playback and some speech synthesis included as well. And then finally we have the noise channel that has some envelope and shape functions as well. So these are quite good for melodic stuff, as well as this one is, and sample can be used for any sound you want. And at some point maybe in the future we can talk about how to load in our own sounds. And then noise is quite good for percussion and sound effects and that sort of thing. So we can place a chain, which is a group of phrases, by pressing A. And each one has a unique hexadecimal number assigned to it. And those are not independent on each channel. So this is the same. If I place 00 over here, these are going to have the same information in them. They're not their own thing. So A will place one, and if you hold A and press left or right, it'll increase that hexadecimal value. And then up and down will move the first digit up and down as well, so quite high. And you can have up to 7 F phrases. So that's quite a lot. Or chains, rather. So if we place our first chain, and we're going to make that 00, try, moving around and adjusting that value until it feels comfortable. Hold select and press right, and you can see it moves us on this map at the bottom right down there to the chain screen. Because the Game Boy screen is quite small, you have to break things up into a lot of individual screens. So we can jump back and forth between these by holding select and pressing left and right, and it moves our cursor through that map down there, and that'll help you get around. Eventually it will become second nature how to get through, but for now, keep an eye on that map down there and move that way. And again, we're going to place another value here, and again, just by pressing A. If you put it in the wrong spot, just hold B and press A, and it'll delete it. We're going to place it back, and that is a phrase. Phrases are where the magic happens musically. We can place our notes here, and this is kind of where the information for the Game Boy to play music back is going to be coming from. You can see it starts from 0 to F on the left side there, and that each one of those is representative of, in most cases, a 16th note. We can do more to change how that works, but for now you can think about each one of these as being a 16th note space in a measure of music. Again, if you press A in this note column here, it'll place our first note. It'll be a C2, and it'll even play it. Holding A and pressing left and right will increase the pitch. Up and down will increase it by octaves or decrease it depending on which direction you press. It gets quite high into the really, really annoying ear-piercing range, and it'll only go down to 2. We'll go back to C2. And that creates our first instrument as well. And then again, we can create up to 3F of those. The 40th one is reserved for the speech synthesizer. We'll deal with that eventually. And again, those values move just like every other value we've encountered so far. And they don't do anything right now because they're all the same at default. So you can place those anywhere on the measure you like. I'm going to place them here, 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 and here. Sure. And pressing start will start the playback only in this phrase. So when you have more stuff in the future, it won't play all of it. It'll just play this one channel, and it's one phrase here. So you can isolate that and just listen to that. And you can hear. Pretty basic. And you can go ahead and adjust those values. In this case, let's move those up here. You can see it's quite tedious, even when I'm very familiar with it. And then we've got a little C major arpeggio here with it. Nothing too groundbreaking musically speaking, and we're not really going to get deep into music theory or how to write a good song. We're just going to learn how to use this tool. Pretty basic, but maybe the sound of that is getting pretty boring. It's a pretty basic standard Game Boy bleep. So just like we gradually moved from the song screen to the chain screen to the phrase screen, we can go even further down and look at the actual timbre of our instruments. In this case, each one of these is using instrument 00. Let's go in and edit instrument 00. Pressing start on this screen will still play that previous chain. So you can preview the changes you make to your instrument's timbre from there. And let's go over each of these a little bit, and we can hear how they change things. Naming is important. You only have 5 characters, so you gotta get a little creative with the abbreviations on it. And it does help in keeping track of your song, especially once you start getting pretty deep into the song. I'm not real good at remembering to do that, but it's a thing that exists. You can adjust the type here for the first 2 channels, PU1 and PU2, these here. You only want to use pulse. And again, holding A and pressing left and right on the D-pad are going to get you to change that value. This is exclusively for that 3rd column, the wave channel. So is this. And this is exclusively for the 4th channel, the noise channel. So you want to use the appropriate instruments in the appropriate channels. And those are not, again, just like how chains and phrases are not independent of each channel, same goes for instruments. So you could accidentally play a wave instrument or a noise instrument in the pulse channel, and it's not going to quite sound right. Although sometimes it can be a happy accident. You don't know. So again, we can see our envelope, and that adjusts the volume over time for the note. And you can even see underneath, and this is a relatively new addition, a sort of visual indicator of what the note does volume-wise directly between the envelope and wave parameters here. So the first, it's broken up into 3 sections, and we can't access the 3rd one yet because we don't have any data in that second one. The first number adjusted by holding A and pressing up and down is going to adjust your overall volume of your notes. And I can hit start and adjust that up and down. You can hear it gets quite quiet. All the way up to F. Pretty loud. Let's just leave that at 7. Stop it for a second. The second one determines how long it takes for that note to get to whatever this number is. So this again is the overall velocity or volume. So if we have it set to 0, it's going to take 8, whatever that stands for, long to get to 0. So if we increase it, you can see it takes a lot longer in the visual display down there to get to 0. And we don't even get to hear all the full of that because the notes are interrupting each other. So if we bring it back, until they get quite punchy. Now, what if we set a lower value than we started here, and then put a little chain on that? So now you've got 2 of these in tandem, and then maybe even a 3rd one. So you can see you can start quite high in volume, take not long to get to this value, so it drops quite quickly to 5, and then maybe takes quite long to get to 2, and then it stops quite abruptly at 1. Well, we'll have to just play. Let's go back, and we're going to delete these other notes. Remember, we said to hold B and press A to delete those notes. And now we can hear. You can see the volume follows that sort of visual indicator underneath there. You can even start at a lower volume, take a long time to get to this higher value, and you can see it kind of increases and then drops back off. Okay, so you can see you get a lot of sounds that way. I'm going to go ahead and put this exactly back to the way it was. I recommend you trying to do the same thing so you can get used to placing notes and deleting them as you go. Okay, and then we're going to go back to our instrument here. Let's go ahead and just set that value back to, hold down to reduce, left to reduce that one. And then once this one goes to 0, 0, it goes ahead and gets rid of that last one because the value doesn't matter at that point. Let's leave that right at about 7, 6. That's reasonable. No, 7, 7. Wave adjusts the timbre, and there are 1, 2, 3, 4 settings for that. That's at 12.5%, 25%, 50%, and 75%. Functionally speaking, for music writing, the 25 and 75, they're going to sound pretty much the same. They're two sides of the same coin. That becomes relevant if you're playing both pulse channels at the same time. They can create some interesting phasing by being at 25 versus 75. But let's hear what each one of those sounds like. We can hear that default 12.5% right here. Let's move it up by pressing right to 25%. It's got a little more of a round sound to it. It's a little bassier. And then once more to 50%, even more so. And then, like I said, 75 sounds a lot like 25, really. Pretty much the same. Output will adjust the stereo playback. It's not very... It's very coarse in that it will only play both channels, only on the left channel, only on the right channel, or not at all, which you can get to by pressing down. Up and down will straight up turn it off and on. And if this video is in stereo, and I hope it is, you can hear it jump only to one of the channels. And that's the full range of all the stereo imaging you can do. Length will cut off your note no matter what you've got on the envelope after a certain amount of time. And that, if you press to the left, you'll reduce that value. And you can even hold it. Until it barely lets it through, and then not at all. I don't recommend doing that for silencing a note because it does kind of create a sort of a clicky sound as the sound chip tries to make that and doesn't quite. Sweep is again a property that's unique to instruments being played in the first pulse channel. If you have an instrument that uses that sweep command parameter and you play that instrument in this channel, it's not going to do that. It's just going to ignore that altogether. And the best way to figure out how to work is just to kind of hear it. It's basically going to have the pitch sweep up or down in a less musical way. It's going to be more of an actual just straight digital value drop rather than something that's going to be a little more precise. And it is logarithmic rather than linear, so it kind of sweeps downward rather than doing a straight diagonal downward in pitch. So it's kind of unique in that way and is very good for percussion. It used to, over a decade ago, kind of be the go-to way to make kick drums and stuff. I don't see it get used that way as much anymore, but I haven't really had my pulse on the community in a while, so I don't know what people are doing. Personally, I don't use it very much. But sometimes it's called for. So we can go ahead and turn that on. Let's go ahead and just kind of sweep the value to the left, no pun intended, and hear what it does to the sound. So you can see it's kind of unpredictable, but you can figure out different things. Pitch is going to affect how some of your commands work, and we will come back to that when we talk about those. Transpose lets your instrument ignore If you go all the way back to the song screen by holding select and pressing the D-pad to the left, if you go up from the song screen, you'll get to the project screen, and you've got a global transpose that will move the entire song up or down semitones, depending on the value you put here. How useful is that? Debatable. Personally, I use it if I'm DJing one Game Boy into another and I want them to be in the same key from one song to the other so they don't clash. Say if you've written the song and you don't quite like the key that it's in, you can move it up and down a little bit. You may run into some points where you are transposing lower than the instrument is able to make, and then the notes will just bottom out. So that can be a little dangerous. But if you turn that off, it will ignore that, and that's really good for drums, because you don't really want your drums to pitch up or down. You just kind of want your melodic stuff to move. So I typically will turn off transpose on anything that's a percussion rather than a melodic piece. So again, I can play it, and the transpose will do nothing now. It will not affect it at all. So we'll turn that back on. PU2 transpose. This lets you play the same thing, the same instrument. This means that if you play this instrument in this channel, it will be the normal. But if you play that same instrument in pulse channel 2, it will adjust it by however many semitones you punch in here. So a half step, a whole step, a step and a half, whatever. So that lets you do something interesting by, say, playing the same chain and phrase in the second pulse channel, which will set that back to 0, and you can hear both of these play at the same time. You can hear them kind of phasing a little bit. This will let you save on some of your channels, because like we saw earlier, there were only 7F chains, and only, I think there's, a full FE of phrases. So if you start wanting to save stuff and you just want to do a straight, strict parallel harmony between two things, you can do that by not having to change anything between the two of these, and these two channels will play different notes spaced apart by however much you place here. So if I move that up to like 7, that's 7 semitones up. That's a musical fifth in between the two of them. Let's go back out. Pretty neat. Or you could take it to 5, which would be a musical fourth. So that's kind of cool too. Again, that's mostly just there for channel economy, and it can be kind of interesting. Fine tune is, just like it sounds, a very fine amount of pitch change. It can be quite difficult to hear the changes. But if we play 2 of them at the same time, like we have out here, and you adjust that fine tune, that's going to be pretty significant once you start hearing the 2 of them at the same time. Oh, something else to mention. The fine tune will move in opposite directions depending on which pulse channel you're in. Pulse channel 1 moves the pitch down from its target note, and pulse channel 2 will move it up. So if you play a unison like this, it'll move this down by a little bit, and the one in channel 2 up a little bit. So let's hear them at the same time, and we'll increase that fine tune. We've got some really, really sick sounding phasing that's pretty cool to have. And even for just an instrument that's not playing in unison with something else, that little bit of fine-tune can add some humanization to your music to make it sound less robotic, and especially in something so strict and digital like this, that can really go a long way to kind of improving the character of your music. And that's basically all of the different parameters of the instrument channel. Okay, so far we don't really have much of a song. We just kind of have that one little looping C major arpeggio here. And that's pretty dull, and we're not really getting into much of a song here, and we still haven't really learned quite how songs are laid out or how they play. So let's get a little deeper into it. We're going to go ahead and hold B and press A to delete that. We're going to go into that previous channel we've talked about, the wave channel, and if it creates the wrong thing, you can always adjust it by pressing and holding A and adjusting that parameter, or delete it. And if you double tap A, it'll bring up the first empty chain, and the same thing works for phrases as well. You can double tap that to get the first empty one, but one should be empty, as should be the case here as well. So now we're in the wave channel, and that's a little more complicated than either one of these two. So we're going to go ahead and double tap here to create a new instrument if it doesn't create one on there. And we're going to go over to the instrument screen, and we're going to change that from wave to kit. Kit is for sample playback. The Game Boy comes preloaded with several kits. Looks like F 15, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 22 channels, or 22 packs of samples. And these are based on famous drum kits. The Roland TR-606, 707, 727, 808, 909. These are all pretty good. A lot of classic dance music and pop music written using these instruments. And then some others as well, whose names I don't necessarily remember. They are laid out in the manual. Fun to look at. Maybe learn some electronic music history. We get into some vocal samples and some other things, and also some of the speech synthesis samples used here as well. For our example, let's go ahead and just change this one here to TR-808, one of my favorites. And if we hold select and go back to the phrase screen, you can see we've actually got two columns here. Now, why is that? The Game Boy is technically capable of playing two samples at once here. I'm not exactly sure how it does it. I want to say it's like interleaving the bits from each one of these kits, but I've never quite gotten an answer on how that works. We're going to set both of these kits to the same thing. We're not really going to use two of them at once for our lesson here, but you can kind of do it if you want to. And again, pressing A will place our first note, and it's going to place a big beefy kick drum in there, and you can hear it's real hissy and full of noise, and that's just characteristic of the Game Boy. Its sample channel is pretty low resolution. It's not a high fidelity instrument, and you're just going to have to learn to love that about it. And holding and pressing left and right, just like changing notes would do, will change which sample in that kit, which is a collection of samples, to different stuff. And they're abbreviated quite strongly, so you'll have to kind of learn the nomenclature of what each of those stands for. But bass drum, snare drum, closed hi-hat, open hi-hat, high tom, mid tom, low tom, cymbal, congas, high and low. Not sure. Maraca, maybe? Rim shot, clave, cowbell, clap, classic cowbell sound. So we're going to go all the way back to the kick drum here, that bass drum. And we're just going to place that 0, 4, 8, and C. And I may have mentioned it before, but you can see it breaks up with highlighting on the left side there, each group of 16th notes into quarter notes. So it's quite easy to see where the beats lie. And again, if we hit start, we'll hear big loud kick drum. And so if we go all the way back here, it'll play. If we hit start, we will hear both of our things at once, our kick drum. Is it going to sound good? Is it going to be a banger song? No, it's not, but it's not bad. Kind of got a, I don't know what I would call that. And you'll have to just, you can try snare drums here. You can do whatever you want with it. I'm not here to teach you how to write a good rhythm section for a song. You can do all kinds of stuff. You are currently locked into just playing 16th notes. Triplets and stuff is where things get really wacky, and you have to start using the commands to do that. We will not be touching that immediately. One of the things that's annoying about this channel is when you're playing with samples is that deleting a note does not delete the instrument there. It doesn't really hurt anything to leave it there, but it looks messy to me. I don't like it. And like I said, you can add stuff in this second one here. For example, if I placed a snare drum here, it would interrupt the sound of that kick drum. Because you can hear it's quite long, and it'll get to there before that's done, and it'll cut it off. But if I place it over here, it won't get in the way of that kick drum. So that's pretty handy. Again, I'm not really sure exactly how it does that, because it doesn't really make a lot of sense. And again, I'm assuming it's interleaving. If you know, tell me in the comments. Much more interesting rhythm section. And you can do whatever you want. You can fill it up with all kinds of stuff. We'll put maybe some of these congas in here. That could be fun. We'll have those syncopate maybe. That's there, and we'll do one here. Fun. So, now that we've got a pretty neat little rhythm section here, and again, you can put whatever you want here. Go wild. You don't have to copy what I did. If you press A, it will actually place the same one that we just had, so that's pretty handy. And like so. So we can start talking about copying and pasting, because if we wanted to make a variation on the fourth measure of this, because you can see if I hit start in the chain screen, you can see it'll actually play each one of these in sequence. And I don't want this to be too different, but I do want it to be a little different. So we're going to learn how to clone. This is one of the most complicated button inputs on the Game Boy, because again, you've only got 4 buttons and a D-pad. So the complex options that you have, they really are relegated to button combos, and that can get quite wild. We're going to hold select, press B, and then A, and that's going to create a new phrase that looks identical to this one. So we can change this one without affecting that one. Right? So maybe we'll just, on this last, we will, we'll move the kick drums more to a 4/4 thing, and then halfway through we'll increase their speed a little bit like that. We'll get rid of those congas for a second. We're going to put the snare drum on every beat with it as well. And then for that last beat, we're going to bring those congas back. So now we can hear we got... And that'll just loop that ad infinite forever. And we can do the same thing here with our little bass melody. We're going to go ahead and we're going to learn to copy, which would be select and B. So hold select, press B, and then press. So that'll enter select mode. Holding select and pressing B, and select large swaths of stuff. But if you just do it right on that single one, it'll copy it. And then select an A will paste it. And you can hold that and it'll fill it all the way up. But we don't want to do that. We're going to go through and delete all those with holding B and pressing A. And just like we did before, we're going to clone this last one. No, let's clone the second one. So in this measure, it's very much like it's the same stuff as in here, but we can affect this one without changing this one. Let's change the notes on this one. I'm going to change them to... I'm going to change this to an A. So now it's an A minor chord, but in one of the inversions. Okay. So then if I put 3 there, it'll play that same stuff that we did there. Oh, now we're going to clone it again. Let's change this here. Let's change it to... Go F. Yeah, let's change the E to an F. Now we'll have an F major chord. And then again, we're going to change this to match that same one. And we're going to clone it again. And that's holding select, pressing B, pressing A, and then letting go of select. So now we've got a copy of 4. Let's change that again to... we're going to change that to G, this to B, and this to D. And we're going to go back to the select thing again. We're going to hold select and press B, release them. We can move the cursor around, and we can select this first half of the measure. And if we go down to here and press select and A, it'll paste everything that we copied here into here. So now we've got, oops. A little basic chord progression. What is that, a 1, 6, 4, 5? Yeah. I kind of feel like the melody, or bass, I guess in this case, is a little overpowering compared to the drums. We didn't really look at the instrument channel for the drums. You can see here, rather than the complex envelope that we have for pulse stuff, we have basically 4 volume settings for kits. And reducing them below anything below 3 really starts to kind of degrade the sound in a way that's even worse. It's almost like only the noise is left behind at full volume. It's not great. Unless you love that, for most cases, I would say leave that at 3, don't touch it. So you kind of are stuck basing the volume of everything else that has a lot more volume control around this sort of like almost set volume that you have in the wave channel. So in that case, since I think this is too loud, we can't really reduce the volume of this or increase it really. We'll have to go in and drop the volume of that. So again, we'll go over to our pulse channel, into the phrase, into the chain, into the phrase, into the instrument, and we can reduce the volume. And we can do that while it's playing if we press start on the song screen. I figure if we're going to use that for bass, we might as well. And basically that works for all of those. Now, no matter how long you make a chain, it will loop when it hits the end. So you can fill this all the way up, and it will run through all of those. That's going to be the most economical for uses of your chains, since there are a limited number of those. Or maybe you find it more advantageous to use shorter chains in groups of 4s or 8s. It's kind of different for everybody, and it kind of varies on the song too. Maybe at a higher tempo, I tend to use longer chains. But usually you want about 4 or 8 at minimum in each chain, Otherwise, your song's going to have a lot of chains and it's going to go down way far, and you're going to use up a lot of resources that you just don't have. Okay, let's add a little bit more to the song. We're going to add something in the other pulse channel and maybe something in the noise channel. We'll go ahead and double tap A because it was placing 0 when I just pressed a single A. That'll give us a new one. In this case, we know that there's nothing in O2, so we can go ahead and move it back to that. And we'll create a new phrase. And we're going to learn a little bit about some of the commands. Go ahead and I'm going to place an pressing right to change the pitch up to an A, and then up and down to change the octave. Okay, so that's just a little bleep. Nothing crazy going on there. Here, if we press A, we'll get an A. But pressing left and right while holding that A will give us a different, almost the full alphabet. Missing a couple of letters, but almost the full alphabet. And each one of these does something different. The first one we're going to look at is C for chord. Now, if you ever want to know what a command value stands for, you can double tap it with A, and you can see it tells you up at the top there exactly how it works. And it tells you each one of these values is a semitone that it's going to arpeggiate through rapidly. So if I add a 1 here, it's going to play an A and then an A sharp. And it's going to go back and forth between those as rapidly as it can, unless I change the aforementioned command/rate. This is sort of a very quintessential chiptune sound that you hear a lot, because it's a way to create sort of the illusion of chords and more going on at once. Like I said before, each one of these channels is monophonic, so it cannot possibly play a chord. It can't play more than one note at a time. But it can play up to 3 notes using the C command and more using tables at a rapid pace to create the illusion, or it can effectively create chords in the listener's mind. A minor chord, a major chord, maybe a major 7th chord, a dominant 7th chord, maybe a suspended chord, a sus2 or a sus4, maybe just a 5th and an octave as a sort of power chord for any guitarists watching. So that is going to be interesting. So we know that back over in the other channel, in our first measure, we played a C major chord. And we're going to play some little offbeat C major chords here. And again, each one of these is a semitone. I know it's annoying. You'll learn to love it eventually. So it's going to play a C. Up 4 semitones is E, and up 7 semitones is G, and that's a C major. Here and here, we're going to play that on the 1st and 4th beat. And again, we're using copy and paste. That's select and B, and that lets you select an area. So we're just going to select everything, including the command, and then select an A to paste it. You can even hold it and fill the whole thing up with it, and it would be terrible, and nobody would like it. But you don't want that. You can even select nothing to paste silence, which is kind of neat and a handy trick. Because the controls are so limited and it's so annoying, it becomes really, really imperative to start to learn these shortcuts, because it's already kind of tedious to use this. So I'm going to go ahead and fill the rest of these out. You can copy it if you want, or you can create your own chords if you know music theory at all. And again, I'm going to use the clone function here. I don't have to recreate that. Now, Once you're deep into a phrase, you can actually change channels. And you can see at the top right of the screen, it tells you which channel you're on. So if those are lined up, you can see that it will change from pulse, holding where we were at, pressing left will take you to pulse 1. Pressing right will take you back. Right again takes you over to the wave channel. And if I had anything in the noise channel, pressing right would take you there as well. So you can use that as a reference to see what's happening in these other channels. Here we can see we've made an A minor. So I'll change this C to A, and that third into a minor third. And we're going to go down, and we're going to create a new, we're going to clone it. And here we played an F major. So F. And that's major. And again, copy. And paste. And once more, cloning it. And here at the end, we played a G major. Something else you can do is you can use that select. If you press select and press B, and then press it a second time, it'll select the whole note column. Pressing it another time will select the entire screen. So, aside from copying and pasting, the other advantage to that is once you have that all selected, you can still hold A and adjust those values together. Even if there's a bunch of different stuff in there, it'll move them in parallel with each other. So pretty neat. We changed those all to F. And again, that's major, so that's what we wanted. No, we want G. I changed my mind. There you can see, select them all, change them to G. All right, and finally, we're going to look at the noise channel a little bit. Let's go ahead and we'll create a new chain, double tapping A. And again, if you know that that's not right, you can change it to something else. 3 is fine. And I already have something in there. We'll delete that. Double tap, create a new one. Now we're going to go ahead and press A, create a new note, and you can see immediately that the note is 30, and that seems weird, right? Because this doesn't really use notes in the traditional sense. These are each kind of pitches of the noise sample that's being played. If you increase it until it gets to those, once you get to 3B, that's our standard noise. And if you go to the left, holding A, all the way down to 0, 0, it'll play all of our different kind of white noisy samples. Now, if we go to up above there, we get into these sort of pitched noise sections, where in these lower ones it's kind of hard to tell, but as we get higher up, these got a little bit of a pitch to them that you could potentially play a melody with them if you wanted to. Would it be a good? I keep wanting to say that. Would it be a good one? It's kind of hard to say, right? And again, we're just kind of showing you as an example. Not the most pleasant thing in the world, but it works. So we'll get back into those numbered ones that are more noisy, because we're going to create some hi-hats, because the drums don't really have anything going on right now. I think 30 sounds good. We're going to hold select, press B, release select, and we can move this over to select both the note and the instrument. And we're just going to hold A to paste that all the way down the row. Awful. Let's go into the instrument channel. And just like the pulse channel, it has envelope, and it already has pre-selected the noise type because that's the channel that we made it in. We could put something else, but don't recommend it. Let's make those real short and reduce the volume a little bit. Maybe like a 5-2. And again, we can press start to preview that measure, that phrase. A little more hi-hatty. That's fine. A lot of these parameters are the same. Output works the same. Length works the same. Pitch is weird, right? Because it's not technically a pitched instrument. So we won't mess with that. And vibrato, again, it does do it. But again, we're not worried about it. Transposing works the same. Command rate works the same. Not really super functional over here. Not really a lot of options in the noise channel. It's play the note, and that's about it. But that sounds kind of flat, right? So we're going to look at another one of these commands. We're going to hold A on the command column until we get over to E. And if you double tap again, you can see it tells you at the top, volume envelope. First digit is the attack volume where it starts, and the second one is where it releases to. So, sounds a lot like the 5.2 that we just had. A little bit different. It's not quite the same for whatever reason. So, what we want to do is we're going to hold select, press B, release select, and that'll let us move this cursor around. We're going to select both the command letter and its value, and we're going to hold A to just paste it all the way down. And we're going to adjust this first value here to kind of create a groove here, because realistically, when you think about somebody playing the drums, no matter how robotic they wanted to move, they're not going to hit it at the same velocity every time, and they don't even want to. They want to play some notes a little bit louder than others to kind of create a feeling. And you can notice, well, once we get through this, you'll see that it is quite different feeling. So we're going to emphasize a couple of these by raising them in volume. I'm going to raise this one and this one, this one. And we're going to drop the ones immediately after that as well, down to 4. You wouldn't think much of that would make a big difference, but compared to what it sounded like before, a much bigger groove. So like again, if I play those two back to back, you can hear them. The difference is pretty significant by just adjusting that little bit of volume on each one of those notes. So it's a pretty big difference. So just like our other chains, we're going to create 4 phrases in our chain. Oops, I made one too many. Hold B, press A to delete it. And just like we cloned before, we're going to hold select, hold B, press A, and that cloned it. And you can even says it up there, cloned phrase. And we're going to go ahead and we're going to delete everything but the ones on the beat. And to facilitate that, I'm going to hold select, press B, release, select that whole row, and we're just going to, that way we can paste rather than have to delete both the instrument and the note and the command. We don't want that. So on these, we're going to take that same instrument, but we're going to adjust the volume. To create different volumed instruments, we could go through and, make a different instrument and adjust the envelope. But we're going to save on instruments because much like chains and phrases, instruments are probably some of the most limited. We only have so many of those. So if we go in here, you can see you could actually only go up to 3F before it hits the speech synthesizer. So you can only make so many of those. So you want to be economical with stuff. We're going to start at a low volume, but a long attack. Or a long release rather. 0 through 7. We'll make it take longer to die off. Shorter and shorter and shorter. Just like how each of these individual sections in the envelope section works. But it's just the one. It's a little more rudimentary. And we're going to actually increase the volume by 1 and take that all the way up to 7. If you go past 7, it will have the volume go up instead of down. 4/8 will have it just maintain forever until you stop it or something else plays. It gets quite loud. And then all the way to there, it takes a little longer to get loud. It really ramps up. Set that to 4. And then slightly increase in volume. Again, slightly increase. And then slightly increase again. That's sort of a cymbal crash fill in here. And we'll hear how that all works together now. Personally, I think the noise channel is a little too loud. So we're going to go in here. Again, we're going to hold select, press B, and then once more, and it'll select that entire column. And we can press up and down to move all of those values at once. So it's not going to affect the way that they interact with each other as far as their relationship to each other. It's just going to drop their overall volume. And let's go ahead and do the same thing for these. We're going to go ahead and drop those down just a little bit. Find that the noise channel can get quite forward in the mix, and it can be a little harsh. Maybe went too far with it. We'll bring them up. It's a little better. So, there we go. We've got all 4 channels going at once. Got some samples happening here. We've got some pulse stuff happening here. So if you create a new row with all kinds of new stuff, our cloning and copying works just fine here. We can paste it here as well. And you can create variations of each of these. You can clone them. You can make whole new ones until you have all kinds of stuff. For example, I'll load up something I've done. Okay, so you can see we did a lot of different stuff there. All the channels were rocking, and you can see I only put about 4 phrases in each chain. All right, well, that covers about most of the basics. If this is something that people end up liking or wanting to see more of, we'll maybe see some more in the future. Feel free to comment if you have any questions about stuff. I'll be happy to respond. Good luck.